Welcome to all, best wishes and endless love to all my students. Today we will learn about the first chapter of plus 2 second year history, sources of Indian history, which includes archaeological, literary, foreign accounts and archival sources. Though archival sources isn't mentioned in some books, however, we will study these four elements. First, we will understand this chapter comprehensively. In brief, we will go through this chapter, and then we will discuss each source clearly and in detail, one by one, to get a comprehensive understanding of this topic or chapter. First, let's watch this video.
Alright, today we're putting on our detective hats, but the case we're cracking isn't some recent crime scene. No, it's the grand, sprawling, absolutely fascinating mystery of India's past. We're going to unpack the historian's toolkit and figure out exactly how we know what we know. How did they piece together such an epic story from just the clues left behind? I mean, really think about it. How do we know what actually happened hundreds or even thousands of years ago? There are no living witnesses to interview, no video cameras, nothing like that. So where does all this knowledge come from? How can we be so confident about ancient empires, huge battles, or even just the daily lives of people from so long ago? Well, the best way to think about it is like this. The past is a giant, complicated crime scene, and the historian? They're the detective, showing up to meticulously gather and analyze every single shred of evidence they can find to piece the story together. So let's look inside their evidence locker. Our first stop, well, it's the most tangible evidence there is. We're talking about the stuff we can literally dig up out of the ground. These are the physical remains of the past, and they're our first and maybe most fundamental set of clues. And this, of course, is the science of archaeology. By carefully, painstakingly excavating sites, archaeologists and historians unearth what are essentially the silent witnesses of history. We're talking about everything from entire lost cities to the smallest, most personal items. Just look at the Great Bath at Mohenjo-daro. I mean, wow. This isn't just a pile of ancient bricks. It's solid proof of a highly organized, sophisticated urban society with advanced engineering. And this was over 4,000 years ago. It tells a story of community, of complex planning, and maybe even public rituals we can only dream of. Now, the clues aren't always about buildings and city planning. Sometimes they're art. These incredible rock paintings from Bhimbetka it's like finding a prehistoric photo album. They show us people hunting, dancing, just living. It's this direct, powerful glimpse into the world of some of the earliest humans on the subcontinent. And sometimes, a huge story can be locked inside a teeny tiny object. Take a single coin. To a historian, that one little coin can reveal the name of a ruler, the size of their kingdom, the health of their economy, and even who they were trading with across the world. It's wild to think that some ancient kings are only known to us today because we found their coins. But out of all the objects we dig up, some are extra special. They're the ones that feel like they were meant to speak to us directly, across the ages. Yeah, I'm talking about inscriptions. The Allahabad pillar is just a perfect example of this. You can think of it like a historical guest book that's been carved in stone. You've got the great Emperor Ashoka leaving his edicts here. Then, centuries go by, and another emperor, Samudragupta, adds his own story of victory right on top. Now, for a long, long time, these scripts were unreadable, a complete mystery. It took the brilliant detective work of a scholar named James Prinsep back in 1837 to finally crack the code. And in doing so, he unlocked a massive missing chapter of Indian history. So, okay, physical evidence is absolutely crucial. But it can only tell us so much, right? What happens when we find the actual witness statements from the past? The stories, the laws, the poems that people deliberately wrote down for the future. And that brings us to our second big category of clues, the literary sources. This is where we find the written narratives, the actual testimonies that give us a peek into how people of the past actually saw their own world. Now, these texts tend to come in two main flavors. First, you've got religious works like the Vedas or the great epics. These are treasure troves for understanding philosophy, beliefs, and rituals. And then you have what we call secular works, things like biographies, poems, and incredibly detailed guidebooks like Kautilya's Arthasastra, which is basically a step-by-step manual on how to run an empire, right down to how to collect taxes and run a spy network. These written sources are so precious, and they're often incredibly fragile, surviving on things like palm leaves. But our detective historian has to be really careful here. Think about it. A court poet, is he really an unbiased witness? Of course not. His job was to make the king look good, not to give a perfectly neutral report. So the key here is to read between the lines. Okay, so if the local accounts might be a little biased, how do we double-check the story? Well, our detective can turn to a third fantastic set of clues. Reports from independent outside observers. For centuries, India was a real crossroads of the world, and that attracted travelers from all over, like the Chinese monks Fa Hien and Huan Sang. Now, they came as religious pilgrims, but lucky for us, they were also really sharp observers. Their travel diaries give us this priceless outsider's view on everything, from the great university at Nalanda to the laws and customs of the day. And it wasn't just them. We have writings from the Greek ambassador Megasthenes in the Mauryan court, all the way to the famous Moroccan traveler Ibn Battuta in the 1300s. And this is so important because by comparing what these outsiders wrote with the local sources, our historians can start to build a much more complete, three-dimensional picture of what was really going on. Right, on to our final set of clues. As we move closer to our own time, that little trickle of clues we had before, it becomes an absolute flood. We are now entering the age of the official paper trail, the archives. You see, especially during the British period, the government produced a literal mountain of paperwork. We're talking official reports, court records, private letters from officials, newspapers, even secret police files. For a historian looking at this period, it is an absolute goldmine of detailed, specific information. Now, it's easy to think these sources are more objective, more dependable than, say, an ancient poem praising a king. But our detective knows better. An official British report about a rebellion is going to have a very different point of view than an Indian nationalist newspaper covering the exact same event. You always have to ask, who wrote this and why? Every source has a motive. So there we have it. Our four big piles of evidence: archaeological, literary, foreign accounts, and archival records. But you know, just finding the clues is only half the battle. The real magic, the true genius of the historian, is putting it all together. See, no single clue can solve the case. It just doesn't work that way. A strong historical argument is built just like a case in a courtroom. You need to corroborate your evidence. Does this piece of pottery we dug up support what this ancient text is describing? Does what this traveler from China wrote down line up with an official government record? It's when all these different sources start pointing in the same direction, That's when the fog clears and the picture of the past suddenly snaps into focus. And at the end of the day, this is the fundamental rule. History isn't make-believe. It's an investigation, and it has to be grounded in evidence. The historian's job isn't to invent the past, but to reconstruct it as faithfully as they can, using every single clue and every tool they've got. And that investigation, it's never really over. New sites are being discovered all the time. Old texts are being reinterpreted with fresh eyes, and new technology is giving us insights we never thought possible. This detective story is ongoing. It's always evolving with every new clue that comes to light. And that just leaves one big question. What are we going to discover tomorrow?
Now students, we will look at the slide for this lesson. Look at it carefully and see how this lesson is arranged in order here. Look at the slide deck for this lesson. Here children, I am providing a study note of what we learned about this lesson. Read this once and take a screenshot to keep for reading later. This is the study note for this lesson. Now students, this is the infographic of this lesson.